Let me begin, Mr. Secretary, picking up on a point that Senator Johnson raised, because I wasn't quite sure about your answer. As I understand it, the governor of Wisconsin now is trying to end collective bargaining for state employees in that state, including teachers. Do you believe that unequivocally that teachers have a right to engage in collective bargaining?
I do. Not only do I believe it, I believe that collective bargaining can be a tool for improving student achievement and is a tool for improving achievement in a number of districts.
All right, I agree with you, but I want to just be very clear, because I wasn't sure about your answer to the senator. You would disagree then with what the governor of Wisconsin is trying to do?
I've been very clear on that. I've had great conversations with him, and I've been very public on it. So yes.
Could you be public with it right now? You disagree with what the governor of Wisconsin is trying to do? Yes. Yes.
Yes. Let me just be very. Let's take a moment if we want to on it.
Are you going to be very clear by being unclear?
No, sir. What he asked from the teachers union was to have them help on the pension costs and the health care costs.
Yeah. Collective bargaining is the issue I want to focus on.
That they agreed to that, and I thought he had his chance to fix the budget hole there. And okay. So there's a different agenda there.
So you believe that teachers and public employees have the right to engage in collective bargaining?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me ask you this. We support the protection in the President's budget to protect the maximum Pell Grant award at $5,500. However, I am deeply concerned that the proposed budget eliminates the availability of a second Pell Grant in the same award year. Now, you know, and I know, because I get letters to this effect every week, that there are millions of students today who are graduating college or graduate school very deeply in debt. And they're working at low-wage jobs because of the nature of the economy, trying to pay off that debt, and they're falling further and further behind. Why did you propose the elimination of that second Pell Grant when it would do so much harm to so many students?
So I really appreciate your concern, and these are very tough and hard and painful cuts. We did that. We had a $20 billion Pell shortfall to fill. We had to make some hard decisions. Our highest priority was maintaining the $5,550 a year for every single student, and to close that $20 billion hole by eliminating the second Pell. That saves about $7.5 billion. So that's not something we do easily or lightly or enjoy doing, but given the magnitude of the Pell shortfall, we felt we
Well, let me ask you this question. I know this is a little bit beyond your pay grade, but do you think it makes more sense to give tax breaks to billionaires or to make sure that our young people can afford to go to college?
Well, I'm not the economist in the room here, but I will say that the most important investment we can make in this country is to make sure children have a great pre-K to 12 education so they can graduate from college and be competitive in a globally based economy. Right. Most important investment our country can make.
Earlier on, I think both Senator Conrad and Senator Sessions and you yourself raised some interesting questions, making the point that, in a sense, education goes beyond education. These are cultural issues. It's more than what takes place in the classroom. One of the concerns that I have had for a long time is that the United States has by far the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Many countries in Europe, Scandinavia have 3%, 4%, 5%. We have 20%. So when you appropriately talk about so many young people dropping out of high school and ending up with nowhere to go, do you think that that relates to the fact that so many of our children start off in poverty, A, and B, comment, if you would like, about how our early childhood education system, our child care system, compares with other countries? Do you think that if a kid starts off in poverty, if there's no decent quality child care available, how does that impact the likelihood of that kid to drop out? Thirdly, our Republican friends are proposing massive cutbacks in Head Start. How do you think that will impact dropout rates?
So I don't think we need another study to tell us how critically important early childhood programs are for closing achievement gaps, leveling the playing field, and giving children from poverty, children from disadvantaged communities, a chance to be successful academically. We don't need another study. We just had another one, though, from Vanderbilt University in the past week where the data was absolutely compelling on the huge impact that high-quality early childhood programs have. When children enter kindergarten, some whom are reading fluently, some whom don't know the front of a book from the back of a book, some of whom don't know their name, they've been called a nickname all their life. That's an extraordinarily challenging task for the best of kindergarten teachers in the world to teach that wide disparity. So,
would you agree, again, and there are a dozen studies to make the point, so I'm asking a question that I'm sure that you agree with, is that if kids enter the school system unprepared, their likelihood of dropping out is going to be much, much greater?
Unquestionably, when I met with the NGA this weekend, we're all facing tough budget decisions, and I challenged every single governor in tough budget times not to scale back in early childhood education.
But yet, as a nation, I'm sorry that Senator Cornyn is not here, but I read things. My understanding is that in the state of Texas, for example, which generally has scores not among the highest in the country, they're looking about laying off something like 100,000 educators. And that's just one state. In my state, there's been pressure as well. You've described that our system is in a crisis. I think that's the word that you used. What do you think will happen if all over this country, in order to balance budgets while, again, we are providing huge tax breaks to billionaires, while we lose $100 billion every single year because corporations and the wealthy stash their money in tax havens in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda, an issue that the chairman of this committee has talked about on many occasions, and yet we find ourselves in a difficult budget situation so that states collectively will be laying off hundreds and hundreds of thousands of teachers. Now, you have said, and everybody seems to agree, we have an educational crisis. Do you think the laying off of hundreds of thousands of educators is going to help us address the educational crisis?
Of course not.
Is it adding to the crisis?
Anytime we don't, again, I'm not saying invest in status quo, anytime we cut back investments in this new vision of education, that hurts our country. I would just go right to the chart that the chairman began with, that the cost of the dropout crisis, the cost of the achievement gap, is the economic cost of a permanent economic recession on this country. That's the cost that if we had the will and the courage, we could solve and put our country in a much, much better spot than we are today.
Let me, running out of time, let me ask you, my last question is, in Burlington, Vermont, where I live, we have a school which has a whole lot of immigrant kids. It's in the lowest income neighborhood in the city. The teacher, because of rules, as you well know, related to No Child Left Behind, was fired because the kids did not perform particularly well on some of the tests. And yet, most of the people in that community see this as an outstanding school where the teacher and principal did an extraordinary, teachers and principal did an extraordinary job. Do you think it makes sense to judge kids who are from immigrant families, some of whom families don't even speak English, the same way as you would judge a family, an upper middle class family who are obviously fluent in English? Does that make sense to you?
No, and whether it's a child who doesn't speak English or a child with severe special needs who can't comprehend a test, to have them take the same evaluation, the same rules as a child who has been in the country all their life, and no, it doesn't make sense.
But why do we do it?
Well, we want to fix the No Child Left Behind law and do it together this year. All
right. Well, I just want you to know that in a school in Burlington, Vermont, which many people see as an outstanding success, because of the work of the principal, that principal was fired. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A big problem is the lack of focus on growth and gain. We need to be looking at improvements for every single child, every child.